all very welcome to the Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet Tech Learnings webinar series. Today's webinar is called How We Engage and Interact Online is Opening New Avenues for Threat Actors. If lockdown has taught us anything in the midst of the current pandemic, it's that technology is no longer a nice to have, it is fundamental to how we live today. Without technology, many more jobs would have been lost, many more people may have been negatively impacted, likely resulting in more deaths, for example. If scientists are not getting the latest statistics or access to the broader research communities, their efforts for a speedy solution are reduced. If people are not getting the latest advice and updates, therefore not conforming to best practice, this also affects the furthering of the COVID spread and again, more deaths. So what we are now beginning to appreciate is that how we use technology fundamentally matters, and that hardware and software are not the only considerations for contemporary threats. How we use technology introduces layers that go beyond the traditional perimeter-based approach to cybersecurity, such as logging and firewalls and so on. Now, we've gotten really good at tackling traditional cyber threats when we implement these tools and apply good practices effectively. But unfortunately, cybercrime as a business is very real, and they have also adapted their business model. To use a political example, consider the power and reach of an effective online strategy. How far can that take you? We're all aware that comments, videos, and memes are prevalent online, and the information shared varies wildly in terms of accuracy. As any digital marketer or online influencer knows, the more sensational the content, the greater the spread. Now, there has been numerous studies investigating the technical aspects of such concerns. For example, the use of bots to flood inaccurate information. And from the social sciences, there are also numerous studies that observe that people have an inclination to share information based on emotional responses, such as fear or humour, for example. If something's funny, we're likely to share it. So propagation is not always artificially inflated. We in the cybersecurity world need to bridge the gap to understand how cyber threats target technology and people together. They cannot be approached in isolation, which demands input from both the computer and the social sciences in order for the cybersecurity community to respond to non-traditional threats. By doing this and understanding how we engage online, we can prepare for better responses. So today we're going to briefly talk about how people are targeted through technology and platforms, and we will start with a few familiar approaches and then review developing trends in online influence threats. We will look at what we need to consider to defend against such risks. So we'll look at technology-mediated targeting, technology-supported lifestyles, and cybersecurity considerations. Before we go any further, all information presented is for educational purposes only, and always seek consent before any cybersecurity engagement and lawful practices. So we'll begin with technology-mediated targeting. Now, there's been a massive spike in COVID-related cybercrime. As we're just starting to come out of lockdown, we'll consider the COVID approaches. So we're going to look at three here. Take the first example. Fake news makes patients think we want them to die. Fearful headlines spread fast and wide, and the traffic generated by fake news sites results in massive revenue streams. This was evidenced in electoral campaigns in 2016. People share links with their contacts, who in turn click on the links as they are received from a known contact, and the effect is then propagated. Advertising techniques are used to target audiences with headlines for maximum impact, an effect which is supported and refined by online advertising metrics. However, the effect may be that people are afraid to seek hospital treatment, particularly at the earlier stages of the pandemic. The second example here, BCG vaccines may be effective against COVID-19. Sensational headlines, however, can have consequences. A headline suggesting that the BCG vaccination provides immunity for COVID led to an increase in demand for the vaccine. The World Health Organization was concerned that this increase in demand could result in the lack of availability of the BCG vaccine, which would have affected the supply to inoculate children against tuberculosis. This third example is one that we are much more familiar with, the traditional phishing scam seeking to part you with your money or your personal data. But phishing and impersonations show no signs of going away. Phishing is the practice of sending emails that appear to be from reputable sources with the goal of influencing or gaining personal information, and many of us are familiar with these methods. Yet, despite our awareness of these techniques, they are still highly effective. As of April 2020, Google was blocking 18 million coronavirus scam emails every single day. So let's just consider this for a moment. Why are we so susceptible to fake emails still? This is an example of an email I recently received. Now, whilst people may be familiar what to look for example, the email address is an alias, as I received this on my mobile phone, the actual email address was less visible without changing the orientation of the phone, essentially flipping it on its side. The client name is an email address instead of my name, which is common in phishing attacks. A sense of urgency to do something is added by leading me to believe that my account is being blocked, the term permanently blocked access. The option to click on a button has a similar look and feel to standard Bank of Ireland apps. Finally, it appears more legitimate as the sender appears to work at the bank. Now, this could be an image taken from an online social media profile, for example. There are many elements of classic social engineering present here. So if we're aware of such tactics, why are they still working? So take the pandemic payment example. Timing. People may be expecting a payment. We have no precedents for such pandemic payments, so we don't know what to expect. In Ireland, as of the 14th of April, 533,000 people have been issued with COVID-19 pandemic unemployment support payments, resulting in a much broader pool of people to target with this specific mail. Add to the mix that people may be under financial pressure, or they may be anxious. All of these things make them more susceptible. All of this is before you consider targeted attacks tailored to induce a response. There are many variations to impersonation. This is another old one. Vishing is the practice of eliciting information or attempting to influence action via the telephone. Again, to a COVID example, a friend of mine recently received a call alleged to be from a contact tracer who sought to get personal information about her as she was her grandmother's next of kin. Now, she had concerns about this and contacted both the HSE and the police, and they confirmed that it was not from a legitimate contact tracer and it was indeed of malicious intent. And this is quite common at the moment. The non-face-to-face nature of online communication has increased the volume of impersonation attempts. Romance scams are well established. However, in a lockdown environment, people may be isolated and feeling particularly vulnerable and maybe are more inclined to take a chance and be more vulnerable to such threats. Or grooming, for example, gaming. In a lockdown environment, people are spending more and more time online. So to this point, we have talked about examples that are not exactly new. However, they highlight the point that we are targeted based on how we're using this technology, which brings us to the next point. How these methods can be layered and built upon based on our technology-supported lifestyles. For the attention economy, your attention is a resource of value to online providers. Your time online is revenue for the provider. Consider the complexities of modern game design and social media. In modern game design, it's no longer simply driving a car around a lap or shooting the bad guy. Games are designed to completely engage you on multiple levels. Developers are battling for your time, otherwise known as the attention economy. As a result, games and applications are immersive and designed to engage. You have in-app purchases, you've alerts, friend notifications, communicating with peers while you play, all made to pull you in, keep you engaged. Attackers are also acutely aware of this. Then you can add in clever digital marketing techniques to prime your target, which in some circumstances can be children, to click something or indeed do something. Lockboxes, for example, are a way to monetize play. In order to proceed, you may need to purchase a key, for example, to open a lockbox. That's not all. Some of the most popular vlogs are people showing people and children how to play games. Imagine you've been playing a game for hours and the tension is high and you get a notification that fundamentally stops you in your tracks. You need a key to proceed. So what do? You go online, you search for a game cheat or a game hack. But if it's at a pivotal point to proceed to the next level, would an adult or child stop and think about the authenticity of a link to click to get the required fix? Then assume that they may have seen this click circulated by their peers on social media. They are inherently likely to trust information received from trusted peers anyway, if they've seen this from somebody that they know or they recognize a name that they've seen. Clever marketing and nudging gently encourages action. It's the very reason why large tech companies make billions. Why wouldn't attackers adopt this successful model with so many willing targets? The approach is straightforward. Malicious actors produce professional-looking social media commentary with vlogs, blogs, and updates that can demonstrate and direct you to even the least technically minded person how easy it is to install their malware. At best, they could be opportunists looking for credit card information. But if malware is traversing your home network, have you really thought about the information that can be picked up from unsecure devices? We need to adopt principles from game design and social media and consider all of the ways an attacker might engage a victim. It's not only malware that we need to think about. Can what we are thinking about be affected? Can our train of thought be redirected? When we think about this, when we go about our daily business, getting from A to B, completing a form or chatting to a friend or a colleague, we're not really thinking of this. We don't tend to think about what is going on in the background. Yes, we're aware that we give data away, but how much thought do we give to the data and metadata we give away? Data that details how long we are online, where we are when we use particular apps, what other apps are on our devices, who are our contacts, when we eat, sleep, how many times our heart beats a minute, and so on. There's an app for everything. Such insights are key for behavioural analysis and enhanced user experience and also micro-targeting. Studies have determined that extremely sensitive information is accurately predictable from even small amounts of online activity. Behaviours such as ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, even happiness and intelligence. Now, if we think about cyberpsychology relates to how we engage online. Cyberpsychology applies psychological theory to explain how individuals interact on cyberspace and how these interactions may affect our offline lives. On a high level, it relates to how we interact with others via technical mediums, how technological developments accommodate our desires and needs, and the impact technology has on psychological states and behaviours. These are just some of the areas that may be considered in an online environment. Privacy. Online privacy is perceived to be high, that we have control over the information we disclose. However, that may not be the case. This is for many reasons. When we communicate online, we have no control over the other party. They can possibly forward our message or record our video. And this is in addition to the standard data collection from platform providers and applications. Trust. Can we really trust what we see? Is it possible that the video is fake, the message is inaccurate, or simply false? If we receive a communication from someone we trust, can we be sure that they received the message from a trusted source? Identity. Does your online self reflect your offline self? How are we presented online? Are we impacted by our and others' online identities? Questions such as, if everybody else seems to be having a great time, what's wrong with me? Are we trying to live up to our online persona? Disclosure. When we communicate online, it is more difficult to get that gut feeling, something that you tend to get in a face-to-face contact. There are more direct questions and responses. Online uncertainty is reduced by asking more probing questions, resulting in heightened self-disclosure. For example, if you're at a conference and introduced to somebody, for example, I'm not likely to say, hello, how old are you? As that would probably appear to be rude. But in an online environment, it's okay to ask questions like this. It's more acceptable. Anonymity. We're inclined to feel more anonymous online, that we can say, do, and act in a way that we may not in person. Whereas the fact is there's always a digital footprint. Disinhibition. It's easier to get caught up in the moment. Sitting in the privacy of your own home, for example, it's easier to behave in a way that you may not do in public. Escalation. When you see everyone else online behaving in a certain way, it becomes more acceptable to behave in that way too, even if you would not otherwise. So before we go any further, let's think about data for a moment. This is an example of a Google timeline. Google Maps was used for directions to a castle. However, location information continues to be captured. Google recorded the time spent walking around the castle, the subsequent shopping trip, including the shops visited, a visit to a friend's house with their full address, a trip on a train to the city centre, and the location of a pub frequented, including the amount of time spent there. Now think of all of the other people in those places with their devices. It's trivial for algorithms to extrapolate interests, behaviours, and relationships based on our use and engagement with technology. Now you might get an app to encrypt and secure your data as you go about your business. There was a VPN app, for example, on the Google Play Store in 2018 that had over 10 million downloads. Now, what the 10 million people may or may not have read was the following, which was clearly stated in the App Store. This app may collect your mobile data. This helps us to improve and operate this app's services by analysing your use of websites, apps, and data. Because we're part of a larger organisation, we also use this info to improve that organisation's products and services, gain insights into the products and services people value, and build better experiences. Now, considering it was a VPN app, it makes sense that the data was captured. It was the subsequent use of that data that led to controversy for that particular organisation, leading to the removal of the app. This, however, is a well-known organisation and it is heavily scrutinised. But what about all of those other apps that we use? It can be difficult for people to identify the intricacies of privacy and the consequences of online disclosure. You see, when we accept terms and conditions or click OK to continue, information is not necessarily stolen, we're simply giving it away. We have faith in social proof. In other words, if something is wrong, surely somebody would tell us. Surely somebody would know. Now think about how information is presented to us. We tend to see brief headlines and snippets of information. Who here is guilty of not reading the rest of a message, notification, or article that they got on their mobile device? Yet you've seen the headline and you can't unsee something. It's also known that people are more likely to accept something as true if they are familiar with it, or they see it again and again over time. So the more we see information in this context, the more familiar it becomes to us. Last year, a paediatrician posted an image of a child's burnt hand next to a well-known child's paint product, which went viral on Facebook. Imagine you saw this, noting that the product's danger was never actually confirmed. Then 6 months later, you're in a toy shop with a child who wants paints. Would you buy them? Now consider what an attacker with the capability, motivation, and opportunity to pursue a long and sustained campaign could achieve. You see, you can't unsee something, even though you may have formed an opinion based on research, and if you looked into the details. To an undecided, uncertain, or unfamiliar group, a brief view of information may be just enough to sway an opinion when making an assumption. It could be someone's guilt or innocence, or standing at a ballot box. That brief notification you saw just as you walked in to vote, is the name fresh in your mind now versus the candidate that you don't know? Or the notification about a bad film review as you're queuing at the cinema? Would you go and see a different movie? Or a bad restaurant review as you're about to make a booking? Notifications and headlines influence us all the time as we simply don't have the time to validate everything we see and what we hear. Now, before we go any further, may I ask you to keep the following in mind. Consider all of the sources of data for analysis. We have social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all examples that give a good indication as to who you are and who you know. At the moment, we're in a cashless society, but all these transactions are also allowed. We've got mobile sensing, which makes it more possible for our movement and location to be determined wherever we go. Health apps and wearables determine our movements and when we eat and sleep. Add to the mix, big data. We now have the computational power for mass analysis. Data that can be trained for analysis with machine learning in addition to artificial intelligence. We're beginning to appreciate the power of online influence. It's been observed in nation-state activities, recently Brexit. And if you're still in any doubt as to whether we are influenced, simply look to the figures. These are statistics of Google and Facebook's growth in recent decades. Consider their business. It's primarily digital advertising because online influence works. Organizations have made billions on this strategy. Collect information about an audience, build powerful algorithms to analyze them, and then link them to advertisers who frame ideas, products, and services to suit a specific audience. Public relations, advertising, digital marketing, and many more billion-dollar industries are founded on the power of influence. It stands to reason that malicious actors take notice too. Technology provides the platform and an available target audience at relatively low cost and risk because they are targeting people susceptible to a particular influence in the first place. That's before you consider other techniques that mold online discord, such as amplification, clickbaiting, or hashtag poisoning. It all depends on the objective of the campaign. So let's consider cybersecurity. Why is online influence critical to the cybersecurity community? Threat actors apply techniques such as positive, negative, and neutral comments to increase the perception of authenticity, or circulating articles from unreliable sources, posting arguments from both sides of a debate to make the argument seem more plausible, yet ultimately it may be biased. targeting individuals who are likely to post a particular headline or view to a broader audience, trolling or harassing people who don't agree with the view, the use of multiple online channels for broader reach across interests and generations, even the false reporting of legitimate accounts to have them temporarily blocked. But it's not just these tactics. Health debates are not new online. A study published in 2018 considered how trolls, Twitter bots, and cyborgs influenced a measles vaccine debate, describing how parents can often trust the internet for information over health officials. How many of us do a quick search before we contact the doctor, or maybe even in place of going to the doctor? The effects of this tactic was observed during the measles outbreak in numerous global locations. We tend to think we know what to believe and what not to believe online. However, let me draw your attention to this information from the EU Global Vaccination Summit in 2019. 90,000 measles cases were reported in the European region of the World Health Organization in the first half of 2019. That is already more than the total for 2018. While 3/4 of the world's population trusts doctors and nurses more than anyone else for health advice, more and more people are going online for information, and they may not actually get to the health professionals. The World Health Organization listed vaccine hesitance as one of the top 10 public health threats of 2019. We appreciate influence operations have occurred in health and elections. However, industry is also impacted by such events, pharmaceutical and telecommunications. The EU expects 5G to boost the economy. However, conspiracy theories linking the wireless technology to the spread of the coronavirus has resulted in the destruction of masts. According to the telecoms lobbying groups, false claims have resulted in over 140 arson attacks on telecommunications infrastructure, such as mobile phone masts, in 10 European countries and assaults on scores of maintenance workers. This is despite the fact that the World Health Organization has debunked these claims. Britain has seen 87 arson attacks, the Netherlands 30, while cases have also been reported in France, Belgium, Italy, Germany. This image is a study that demonstrates how the authors made it appear that their statements were in fact made by the US President Donald Trump. This study, published in 2016, demonstrates how video can be manipulated to allow a person to make a statement that appears to have been said by someone else. Developments combining audio and video will make it increasingly difficult to determine what is real and what is not. Traditional approaches that influence behaviours can have a significant effect, especially online. Interpretation of terms such as disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and fake news remain ambiguous. Moreover, the value assigned to the term fake news can simply be used to describe something that the reader simply disagrees with. Disinformation is generally the deliberate creation and sharing of false or manipulated information, intended to deceive and mislead audiences for gain, whereas misinformation is applied when the sharing is inadvertent. Propaganda, however, is of particular interest, as propaganda campaigns endeavour to alter the worldview of an audience or a group, to essentially seed an idea in a particular audience or group that over time they accept to be their own belief all along. This is incredibly powerful, and history is awash with examples of the effectiveness of propaganda. Simple messages repeated over time until they are part of day-to-day knowledge. Language and issues that are familiar and local to us make the message seem more plausible. So let's put all of these pieces together. Consider what happens when disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda is combined with and built upon other attacks and exploits. Layered attacks, attacks built on data from breaches, tainted leaks, or modified video. It is clear to see why such threats are a cybersecurity issue. Now, may I remind you of this slide and 3 points. We all have a vast digital footprint. Targeted advertising works, and influence threats are real. Then consider their magnitude in an online world. You have to bear in mind, we are influenced all of the time. In fact, we need to be influenced. Influence can save lives. Many professions use influence to enhance and support our lives. Doctors, police. For example, there has been great work from all aspects of society spreading the message that protects us from COVID-19. Reputable governments, organisations and officials have successfully influenced how we behave in order to minimise the spread of the COVID virus. We're all doing things that we would never have thought about doing only a few short months ago. We see the advice, we understand the simple message, and it makes sense that we adhere to the advice for our own protection. Over time, it simply becomes part of what we do. Again, we are influenced all of the time. And on the main, it's for the greater good. But when it is not, we need to understand exactly what it is, how it works, and how it impacts us. It's only then, when we understand what our situation is, that we can proactively respond. I'm very conscious of the fact that this is a very big issue, and this is a very brief introduction. This challenge demands input from a multitude of skills, and that's really the key message that we're trying to talk about today. We need to come together so that we can understand the challenge from different perspectives, because we are targeted precisely on these different perspectives. Consider what it is that you do, what is your interest, be it in the computer or the social sciences. How can we help mitigate online influence threats together? To defend and mitigate them, we need to understand what the threats are, how they present, and why they are effective. We need to understand how language can be weaponized, or as Joseph Borrell quoted recently, the battle of the narratives. How can we best work through swathes of data to predict emerging threats or threats in progress, and to shrink this data down to something that's actionable, that we can do something with it? How do these threats impact social control and governance? What is the position for policing, crime, prosecution? There are many, many questions and nuances that arise when it comes to online influence, and this is only set to increase. I suggest that we all have a role to play to mitigate influence threats. So the key points are: not all threats present on traditional security systems. As systems become more secure, attackers will use other methods for their advantage, and there is significant gain, financial and otherwise, in online influence. People are not the weakest link. We need strategies cognizant of how people behave and human and technology interaction. How technology impacts our behaviours and how our behaviour determines technological developments is critical to an effective cybersecurity response. Can your skills and knowledge help defend against these threats? People and technology are inherently interlinked now, and we need to respond with that in mind. On that note, I thank you for your time. I believe we also have time for some questions, and then I will leave you with some references should you wish to investigate further. Would you recommend including the psychological context in cybersecurity training, highlighting how we can be targeted? Would that be more powerful than just focusing on the technical aspects of attacks? Yes, I believe that the conversation really has to be opened up to much broader communities. And I think that one way that this can be done is even within universities and training courses, that if we bring in people from different disciplines to bring up different conversations, to ask questions. So, for instance, you could have a cybersecurity person speak to somebody from a digital marketing discipline, and they might have different ideas on how information is spread and how news is propagated and how advertising metrics can be used to tailor and refine what can often be targeted attacks. So it's opening the door for cross-discipline conversations. How do we get these messages across to children who must be more at risk online? This is a key one. We need to understand what exactly. So the conversation is present that about how children are acting and engaging online, and the key term that keeps coming up is that we need to understand what it is that they're doing. But if we talk to them about how they're playing a game, what game are they playing, and just asking them what are they doing and how does it work, can often lead to questions and give you more insight as to what's going on. They may say something like, I was chatting to somebody online that you may not have been aware of. And it's only by having the casual conversations in the different contexts that they may give you more information about how they're engaging, and it opens up the conversation. Is there a plan to let school children know about how they can be tricked to click on suspicious links when they are playing game? There are numerous events and campaigns going on throughout schools at the moment whereby cybersecurity professionals go in and talk to them about what's going on and how to be aware of these campaigns. It's becoming more common, and there are organisations that are involved in this particular campaign. Is there much research going on in this area, as it is very new to me? Yes, it's becoming more prevalent, and really it's in the last few years that there's a much higher emphasis on it. So, for example, from a technical perspective, there's a lot of research has gone into how is information propagating and how to tell if there's a massive increase in automated like ads, for argument's sake. But there's less, and there's not as much, whether it's becoming more the case, conversations linking these different disciplines together. Now, I would just want to draw your attention to some of the recommended readings should you wish to pursue this further. And this is all going to be made available, I understand. So thank you so much for your interest in attending and the time that you've given to us today. We hope it was worthwhile and that you've enjoyed the webinar. And I hope that everybody stays well. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this webinar, please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date with all our news, events and programmes. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one.